Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
WCAT Radio now presents The Open Door. I have left an open door before you, which no one can close. Open to the love of God, open to joining His stream of love for others. And on our panel again today, we have all the regulars. Dr. Rhonda Chervin, Catholic writer in Corpus Christi, Texas. Dr. Richard Garrity from Birmingham, Alabama, professor of philosophy at EWTN, writer of books about Aristotle's Ethics, Plato's Republic, who is also writing a book about Blessed Cardinal Newman's Apologetics. Dr. Jim Hannock from Los Angeles, philosophy professor, father of 5 children, pro-life activist, editor at New Oxford Review. And finally, Commander Al Hughes from Corpus Christi, Texas, colonel in the Air Force, a married father who converted to the church from being an agnostic, also has degrees in engineering and in pastoral studies. So, Commander Al, take it away.
Thanks, Bob. Today's topic is authentic humility, that is to say, Christian humility, which in a lot of minds has a bad rap, and it's worth talking about. A lot of people view humility as being a Christian doormat, a punching bag, if you will, for those who would be our adversaries. It's a total distortion, and in part I think it goes back to a movie of the 1930s in which the hero of the movie was trying to live the saying, if you are struck on one cheek, you turn the other cheek, and he was taking that quite literally in the movie. Gives the person a bad understanding of humility as being a punching bag, if you will, a doormat, a Christian doormat. However, that's as far from the truth of authentic humility. So, panel, how do we understand authentic Christian humility?
Well, one thing I would say is there's the expression, humility is truth, right? And then you say, well, what's the truth about which a Christian is being humble? And the truth is, as we know in Genesis, there was Lucifer, one of the great creatures created by God from nothing, and he says, I will not serve. And for that, he's kicked out of heaven, and he's in hell for all eternity, but for a while he can go around the world trying to mess up God's creation. All right, that's one truth. The second truth is Adam and Eve fell, and they were kicked out of the garden, and the story is they were on the way to hell too, but God made an exception, and he would be redeemed. Now, the upshot of the whole thing is we're all descendants of Adam and Eve, and if it was not for Christ, we'd all come into existence and go to hell for all eternity, if it weren't for the mercy of God. So God comes in and gives us the church, and then after that we have a war between the city of God and the city of man. And at the end of it, all those in the city of God go to heaven forever, and those in the city of man, they go to hell forever, and that's the truth. Now, have I overstated the truth? Has it been oversimplified? Or is that the way it is? And then we say, well, if that's the way it is, then humility only tells us, agreed. But then, wow, I mean, are we really buying into something? I mean, buying into it. Just try giving a little talk like that today to Americans in general and see how long you'd last. It wouldn't last very long, I don't think. But anyway, that's my contribution, my humble contribution to the discussion.
I just wondered, maybe I misunderstood what you said, Richard. It made it sound as if mercy only came in with Jesus, and that all the Jews, even the prophets, went to hell, would have gone to hell if he hadn't come, which is, I don't think is good theology, but maybe I misunderstood you.
No, in the Apostles' Creed, Christ went down, and all those people who were good people before Christ came, they went up to paradise with him. So no, the pagans and the Jews could still end up in heaven. The good ones.
No, I mean without Christ. I mean, which of course is counterintuitive.
Well,
there's plenty of things about mercy in the Old Testament, and Sheol, the word Sheol, which is the word that's used in the Creed about he went to hell, down to hell meant a sort of waiting room for people before Jesus came, but that was different than hell as we know it. So I just want to clarify it so people don't think you're saying that all the Jews would have gone necessarily to hell. We just don't, I think that's pushing it too far.
You're right. You had God. He was God before he became Christ, was God. And then Christ, who's God, became a man, and then you got this new twist. But no, people ended up in heaven, in paradise, before Christ came. The Jews, the pagans. Yeah, agreed. A good point.
Okay. So, Al, here. So, in light of that structure, if you will, of reality, then our role as humble Christians is to live in the truth about ourselves and the truth about our relationship to God.
Right. Live in it and say it wherever we happen to be in whatever age we are in. Right now, we're in what I would call an apocalyptic age, where the culture, the people in general, the intelligent, they don't want to hear it. I mean, it's an insult to human dignity to suggest there's a hell for which you could be put forever by this God, who judges your life and says it may be inadequate and you're going to go to hell. And, of course, the prayer, Holy Mary, Mother God, pray for our sinners. That means we're all sinners from the Pope on down. And she's pray for us so that we go to heaven and not go to hell. Yeah, that's the message. And I'm saying, man, oh man, is that one hell of a message to be going around telling people today.
Jim here. Let me do a little color commentary. Thinking of what Richard and Al have said, I think this reality structure that Richard is presenting involves, in a very powerful way, a call as much as a judgment. When we think of Jesus, he's calling the apostles, calling them, and we think in a day-by-day way of our vocation, our calling. So the call certainly is a call away from disaster and despair and all of that, and deception, and a call to seeing God face to face. But I think that theme of call is absolutely central. And both Richard and Al have noted the times in which we live, and Al at the outset was speaking about false humility. And the truth of the matter is that for many of us, we're only comfortable speaking about humility if we're warning one another against false humility. Everybody is against false humility, that's for sure. But this is not anything new. So often things we discuss are not new. If we look to that fairly noble, sometimes noble pagan Aristotle, great discussions of the virtues, but humility isn't mentioned. And when St. Thomas comes to discuss humility, he has to do so in a way that aligns it with super charitable interpretation on Thomas's part, Aristotle's rather extended discussion of magnanimity, the great souled one. And if we fast forward from Athens to Edinburgh, we get to the Scottish Enlightenment with David Hume. Hume actually refers to humility as a monkish virtue, a monkish virtue.
Right.
So there are whole stretches of history where humility is ignored altogether, and then whole stretches of history in which it's denigrated, and yet it's a fundamental virtue. Fundamental virtue.
Well, I just thought of something interesting. On the one hand, we all dislike, if you think of one aspect of pride that's the obvious opposite to humility is arrogance. Okay. So we all hate arrogant people who act as if, I'm going to save the world, I know everything, I've arrived, just listen to me, and, everything will be well. We all hate that sort of person, right? Okay, now, on the other hand, Teresa of Avila in her writings, and some other saints as well, always describe themselves as despicable worms. And that always sort of, just sounds funny to me. I'd rather, she says, I'm a pathetic little sinful human than say I'm just a worm. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, there is this Latin that we sometimes run across, ego sum verbis et non homo. I am a worm and not a man, and that's from the Psalms. So,
oh, yeah? I forgot about that.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think that there's such a thing as Spanish and, I can't think of a similar word for Spanish, Italianate rhetoric that I would be happy enough to do without.
Yeah. Well, before we get off the subject of worms, there's fishing for the truth here. Winston Churchill was accosted on the front steps of the House of Commons by a woman one day who told him that he wasn't so smart, he was just a worm. And he thought a moment about that, and he said, yes, my dear, I'm a worm, but I do think I'm a glowworm.
Right.
Which goes back, which is a nice segue into, I want to hook on to what Jim said about a call. Yeah. We're all called, and the calling is based on our creation on the gifts and the experiences and the training, the education, everything about us. And within that call that comes through our life and our experience, we are called to do something with that. And if one and so that requires some self-knowledge. You can't truly be humble about yourself and know your own limits and your own strengths unless you really know something about yourself. So a true, authentic humility, let me give you an example. I'm listening to 3 professional professors of philosophy. I'm not going to argue with them on the topic of philosophy. On the other hand, they probably won't argue with me about the techniques and the reality of being a spiritual director. Maybe they would. I don't think so. That is to say that we each have our own special calling, and to recognize and operate in that calling is true humility. It's being consistent with the truth about oneself.
Well, that's very, very well stated. However, your daughter, Katie, who's on this program, Katie, who's a spiritual leader in the Southern California, and I said something complimentary to Katie, and immediately she said, when she was visiting her father, Al, here in Corpus Christi, she immediately said, "Oh, yes, with God's help." See, now, humble people very often add that sentence to any praise that is offered them. They say, well, with God's help or the Holy Spirit's help. So now, of course, that could become a little pretentious or strange if you did it every single minute of the day, if you're a person who's often praised. But I always like when someone says that, and I like when I remember to say that. That feels very true, because after all, we didn't invent ourselves, right?
Right, and that's the other half of authentic humility, is not only sticking to the truth about ourselves, but sticking to the truth about our relationship with God.
So I want to get back to that worm business. You have worms, little worms, then you have snakes, and then you have dragons. So I guess you have a variety of those creatures. Now, the thing that struck me, I look at myself. Well, I think I'm a fairly decent fellow, not perfect, but I mean decent enough. The faith tells me that if Mary didn't agree to be the mother of God, and God didn't agree to come down and die for me, die for us, if I were born, I'd end up in hell. See? I mean, isn't that the truth now? So whether I'm a little worm, a snake, or a dragon, it's hell because of the fall of Adam and Eve. Now, so that's getting pretty personal. I mean, and even in the Hail Mary, it says, Holy Mary, Mother, pray for us sinners. That counts in the Pope on down, us sinners, see? Save us from what? Save us from hell, which means that we could go there, even now, after Christ came. So, is that the truth, see? And then when you look at it that closely or that personally, you say, whoa, that's getting very personal, isn't it? Very personal.
Well, there's this old saying, isn't there? The truth hurts. Let me move from truth to another dimension of humility, if I might. Truth is the object of the intellect. When we set out to know something, what we set out to know is the truth. But humility isn't classically understood as an intellectual virtue. It's understood as a moral virtue. And if we think of humility as a moral virtue, to be sure it's under the direction of right reason. That's the case for all the moral virtues. But more specifically, humility is a form of temperance, not as in Women's Christian Temperance Union, a misconceived organization if there ever was one. But rather, temperance is a virtue whereby our striving for the good, our seeking the good, our desiring the good. It's a matter of conation rather than cognition. Our seeking the good is ordered. And in humility, we recognize our limits in pursuing this good or that good, and we recognize that all goods are good insofar as they participate in God. So we have a fundamental humility, and we understand the virtue of humility, a form of temperance in relationship to God. Now, I take this to be very interesting in terms of religious secular debate. It's sometimes said, and I think it's said in a well-meaning way, that we can understand natural law thinking without a reference to God. And if you have a kind of a bare bones natural law thinking, I suppose that's so. But if humility is a virtue, and it's a virtue that we can understand, make sense of, it really depends on our recognition of God. And so there's a truth about the moral life that we have access to only as believers.
Right. One form of this could be the basic thing of recognizing that you didn't create yourself and that God created you. So this idea of being proud, I'm always very interested in how proud people are of their looks in different ways. You know, like if they basically look good to other people in comparison with other people, say, who have certain defects, physical defects, either by nature or by as a result of their habits of one kind or another. But it's just amazing to me how people take so much pride in having these attributes which were gifts of God to them. In no way do they add it, as Jesus said, no one can add a cubit to their stature, you know. So there is this way in which, people should feel differently when they recognize that they didn't. But even without God, I guess someone could recognize that they didn't create themselves.
That point, though, I think if you want to get authentic humility, you got to put in the Creator, and then that makes us the creature. Well, right away, that sets the relationship. We're created from nothing, and we're creatures. And the truth of it is, we're creatures. But see, the problem is, and this is, you can call it's original sin. And I think all of us can confess to this. Really, in certain circumstances of life, we see that the question really is, well, who's God, me or the real one? I mean, we find that to be a real question. If you analyze it, now we don't want to look at it that way. We say, no, we're not. I was just harmed and something was done to me. It was wrong, it was not fair. But a lot of it comes down to who's God, me or the real one? And perhaps that would be a fruitful area where, on the one hand, we recognize intellectually we're creatures. On the other hand, we have this drive to be gods. You know, which doesn't make sense, but boy, even if it doesn't make sense, it's a drive. See, and maybe that's what I think the commander was referring to, the moral virtue, dealing with the appetites, the drives, the feelings. A little different from the intellectual virtue of recognizing God's the creator and we're the creature.
Someone gave me this prayer, and maybe some of you know it has a little footnote, but I cut it out of something and I didn't put in the footnote, so maybe some of you are familiar with this prayer. And when I first read it, I hated it and you will see why. But and I read it every day just for, reality check. And it's a famous prayer of some sort. Make me poor of heart, one who is profoundly aware of his misery and who places his trust entirely in God. Pure of heart, entirely detached from the riches of this world and free from earthly ambitions. Humble of heart, truly happy to be ignored, left in the dark, and even pushed aside, despised, meek, one who spreads the sweetness and charm of your love, open, welcoming, and understanding of others' pain, considerate, a messenger of your goodness and your peace, simple and cheerful, remaining joyful even when I experience my misery, trusting in your omnipotent love, a silent heart that stops tongue wagging and forgives and forgets all wrongdoings, a generous heart that never refuses to help and lend a hand, a heart of sacrifice, offering discreetly its hardships to the growth of the kingdom. Well, anyone who knows me would see why at first I hated this. But, it's nice to talk about humility, but when you talk about being ignored, left in the dark, pushed aside, despised, do most of us really hope for that?
Rhonda, it seems to me that's a very poetic definition of detachment.
Oh, yes, I see that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, see, that's what happened in the agony in the garden. Christ, being God, knew what was coming, and he sweated blood. And he was looking for some help from his apostles, and they were sleeping. The first time he came back, they were sleeping the second time. So we have God himself showing fear, and he said, yes, not my will but thine be done. But he isn't quite racing to it. He's in dread of it. But, that's not to counter the other way of putting it, but then you have different varieties of people at different times, different temperaments, different ways of expressing it. But what you do have, at least, is a witness of Christ. He sweated blood at what was going to happen to him. And what struck me in one program, they brought out, if God did not make a special effort to stay alive, he would have been killed before he even got crucified. They were so painful and so horrible, the unique, that it took the divine will to keep him alive, so that he only died when he chose to, after 3 hours in the cross. But anyway, another counter image, Christ, you could say, didn't exactly go embracing the cup, like, whoopee, I've won the race.
Yeah, let me insert something here about sweating blood. Well, I'm sure some people kind of doubt that, but that is an actual recognized medical condition caused by extreme anxiety.
Yeah.
It's real, and it can happen to anybody if you get into bad enough of a situation.
Yeah, you're bad enough. Soldiers certainly do that. Certainly do that.
So let me run us off in a slightly different direction here. From way back at the beginning of our discussion, the false idea of humility as physically turning the other cheek. I think the word is metaphor for something else, and the something else is the idea of patience in adversity, being non-combative. But it does not mean being ultimately a punching bag.
I think in von Hildebrand's chapter on this in Transformation of Christ, his chapter on humility, he points out that the thing is, the truly humble person, it's not that he couldn't retaliate when insulted, for instance. He knows he could retaliate, but he chooses not to out of love of enemies or, out of love and forgiveness. It's not that he chooses out of cowardice. Being a doormat is a form of cowardice.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And of course, the rule there is prudence. Is it prudent to resist, or is it prudent not to resist?
See, and that's where, and that's why you got to bring in the Christian, the Catholic warrior, the knight, the soldier who's willing to sacrifice himself to save his people. And of course, Christ could be seen as that too, as the warrior, the one standing against the powers that be, against the devil, and to protect his own, he'll give his life for it, see. So you can't so slant humility as to exclude the military, the crusader, because there have been a lot of fighting going on. For instance, you have the Mohammedans in the 7th century swept up, almost got halfway through France. And how were they defeated? Well, they were beaten back. And of course, now we're seeing the East attacking again, and a lot of the West be very pacifist, and almost welcoming the Islam, much in preference to welcoming the authentic Catholic Church. So you got to put the warriors in there too.
Well, traditionally, Christian warriors would give the victory to God, and David does that constantly in the Psalms. David always says, God fought for us, that's why we won.
That's right. But David got to be a pretty good shot with the slingshot.
Yeah.
I mean, that just didn't happen to him. He practiced, bouncing them off bears and lions. And that's what a warrior does. He practices.
I forget which psalm it is, but there's a line in one of them that says, our Lord is a warrior.
Right. He's a lion, right?
So let me ask the question again. So does this idea of turning the other cheek, is that simply a metaphor, or is there any more truth we can dig out of that false view of humility?
Well, what struck me is when you have the Marines, young fellows, shock troops, heading towards the beach, and a landing craft, and the enemy sitting up on the hill shooting away at them. They know a lot of them are going to die. I mean, if you want to say turn the other cheek, that's turning the other cheek. You're putting up your body, even if you have a plate on it and all that stuff, to be torn apart by bullets, and that's part of the business. And that's why I guess the Marines honor the past and the dead so much, because a lot of their role is, despite their wishes otherwise, is to get killed, to get slaughtered in these terrible battles.
Like Christ, they give their lives for others.
Right. I mean, very much. And then it struck me, you get a bunch of 18-year-olds full of gung-ho. I remember one man describing Robert E. Lee as a great Christ figure. Now, he was one hell of a warrior, okay? But there was a patience about him and a nobility about him. The author said was Christ-like, and I agreed with him, seeing it from that angle.
There are still some of us that would agree to that.
See?
Us Southerners, yeah.
That's it. Yeah, well, as a Yankee and all that, hey, Robert E. Lee, I don't know if you could put Sherman into that same category or Grant, but...
not if you're from the South, you don't.
No. Well, now, even if you're looking at it from the viewpoint of the truth, say, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
In the Air Force, you often heard the expression, you got to expect losses in a big operation.
Right. Sure. I mean, you think of those planes pounding Germany, going miles beyond their range, beyond their fighter escort for a while.
Half of those
shot to pieces.
Half of those crews never got home.
Right. And what makes that painful is in the foxhole you're so damn miserable with fleas and damp and hunger and this and that. There's a certain point you don't care. These guys would come back to a regular barracks and they'd have good food and live like a human being again. But they know the next day they'd have to hop into that plane and go through something quite inhuman, so.
Right. Let's slide over into the other part of this topic of authentic humility, and that is authentic humility the core virtue? And if it is, why is it?
Say that question again.
Yes. Some would say that humility, in fact, I think Jim has already said it once, humility is the core virtue, the basic virtue upon which all other virtues depend. Is that true? And why?
It's interesting that Augustine seems to come very close to that view, that humility is the core virtue. There's even a sermon in which he says, he asks this question, do you propose to raise the great fabric of high virtue? Then attend first to the foundation of humility.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I think that as you read Augustine and as you read any of the saints that reflect on these matters, charity is the greatest of the virtues, and humility isn't an intellectual virtue. It's not a theological virtue. It's a moral virtue, and it has to do with our striving and the ordering of our striving for the good. Now, when we were thinking about reflecting on turning the other cheek and the metaphorical dimension, I think sometimes there's an impatience in wanting to cash out all the metaphors, but I think they're there for us perhaps to encourage us not to try to cash out the metaphors completely, but to allow space. There is certainly such a thing as epistemic humility. I want to know everything. Knowledge is a good, but I ought to recognize my limits in the pursuit of knowledge. And when I hear Richard and Al speaking of military examples and military history, I often think, even though Ralph McInerney, a great Thomistic philosopher, became a Marine when he was 17 years old, I think it's a matter of epistemic humility today for anybody who's 17, 18, 19, 20, any of the undergraduates that I've ever had, to say, well, I wouldn't know enough about whether or not this was a just war or not. And on that account, I really would be enormously hesitant to participate in them. Now, I suppose there have been times in which people have been quite sure that a war is just, but I think if we have some epistemic humility, I think we should be very, very cautious. And especially as we come to know the entrenched deceit on the part of governments, which are, of course, eager to tell us that such and such is a justifiable military intervention, I think we should be very, very cautious.
It seems to me that would be just a very good topic just in itself. We've touched on it many times, but maybe we need a whole session, to go war by war into that issue. But there again, you get the whole thing of which history book did you happen to read,
Well, that I think contributes to the epistemic humility.
Oh, yes. But I mean, to recognize...
I read that book, there is this famous expression, beware the man of one book.
Well, there is a point of a just war or not. Well, let's take the ISIS people, burning up people in cages and this or that and so on and so forth. Now, although, our military or no military there ever been angels, I mean, if you just look at the pretty obvious thing, you can tell who the good guys are and the bad guys. I mean, you have these crazy jihadists, people going around blowing up people indiscriminately and all that. And then, even if you're not a great philosopher, you say, well, that shouldn't be. That's outrageous, and they should be put down. They should be stopped. And this is without going through all the four conditions of a just war theory. The people just shouldn't do it, and if you have a chance to stop it, you get in there and stop it.
So then,
I think that's a good example, and there's some discussion among members of that rivulet of the future, the American Solidarity Party, about the use of the bunker buster bomb in Afghanistan. It seems to me that on the face of it looks like certainly a legitimate use of force. However, that I think is rather atypical.
Well, and certainly the zealots were right instead of Jesus, since the zealots wanted to fight with arms against the Romans, who were certainly doing terrible things, such as crucifying people all over the place.
But then you have the Crusades. See, the Crusades fighting, they're trying to liberate Jerusalem. So you have all these concrete things, and I think they fit together, but you need a much, much broader framework. Otherwise, you end up with humble people being pacifists all the time. Well, pacifism is not a church stand. You got to have room for the military, for the aggressive, for fortitude, for fighting, for winning.
Well, I think you can have arrogant pacifists. I've known a lot of arrogant pacifists.
Yeah, right.
I think the use of violence or the rejection of violence, while related to all other moral questions, everything ultimately connects with everything else, is somewhat apart from the question of humility.
I guess there's a tenuous connection between humility and just war theory, but I wonder, perhaps we need a separate hour to discuss just war theory. I was, on the other hand, from something I was saying last night in Rhonda's writers group, I once ran into when I was in working on my master's in pastoral ministry, ran into a nun who was very anti-military and was causing me a lot of grief. So my last paper of that semester was on the ethical use of atomic weapons, and I made my point, and I got my A- out of it. But she was not very happy with me.
Well, I think we should come back to.
Let me finish my point. I think we're swinging back around to prudence again, and what is the measure of prudence in very difficult times? And good men may disagree.
It's interesting that you would make that point, because in distinguishing between intellectual virtues and moral virtues, classically prudence has always been seen as both.
Mm-hmm.
It's the right reason dimension of acting well or thinking well. People could think well in a certain very narrow sense, but fail to be prudent, and people could act splendidly in a certain way, a certain perspective, but fail to act prudently. So prudence is classically it's seen as the master virtue, the director of the orchestra, as it were.
Yeah, to think about Rhonda's example, the zealots of Christ's time, I would suggest, were imprudent. There was no way they were going to beat the Romans by violence. And on the other hand, I would say ISIS is somewhat imprudent in thinking that they can dominate the world with their vicious tactics.
Right. It's interesting that the argument that they often propose is in the neighborhood of a point that we often make, to wit, the West is so profoundly decadent, so rotten through and through, that it's not nearly as strong as people think it is, and that people like ISIS and fellow travelers actually might just do what they say they're going to do. Now, I think they're wrong on every level, but
they made the same mistake in the 14th century, 15th century, somewhere back there.
Well, I don't know that anybody could say that the high Middle Ages in the West were periods of profound decadence, but you could certainly say that about Los Angeles. The latest thing here in California is that there's a bill that would require all public post-secondary institutions of higher learning, a.k.a. this is going to include everybody, community colleges, abortion access, to provide it there on the campus as something publicly required. Now, it's hard to get underneath that. I mean, in terms of new lows, that's about as low as you get.
See, that's why in a modern atmosphere, to have to put in an hour now talking about just war theory, I say, my God, what? Today you're going to talk about that? And I'd much prefer to say, hey, look, there's a policeman, and there's this nut running around shooting people, and the policeman risks his life for it, and even in the Decatur thing, even in Chicago, or even in California, for God's sake, there are a lot of cops and men that stop the guy, risk his life to get the guy, and that's why sometimes I don't appreciate talking about a lot of theory, because what's endangered now is the basic fact, our basic sense of reality, that people have piped in all kind of enervating things, and yet there's still men around, and they'll risk their life to stop someone. And there are plenty of people around like that. And they're not philosophers either, see? So I would try to put in and restore the fact, concentrate on the fact that there's a matter of fact. This happens. This still happens, despite what all the professors and the psychologists and the pacifists say. man will try to defend the ones he loves.
I think the discussion has to go, as Al likes to say, macro and micro. We can talk about military actions on the part of great nation states, or we can talk about police intervention in particular cases. And I think there's a connection between the two, a bit by bit by bit connection. But when we speak about police interaction in particular cases, well, if we're interested in facts, there's the fact of corruption of police departments in many parts of the country,
right?
And they're found out. It's a fact that they have violated their oath to protect, and in fact have exploited. So there's no sphere of pure action that we can look to.
I would like to get back to the examples of humility, because I think we need to be challenged. And I came up in my mind with a very simple one. Suppose you're donating money to someone who's down and out. So it would be very arrogant if, the way we put it, we walked up to a street person and said, "Now, I'm a very successful worker, and I never missed a day of work, and that's why I have plenty of money, and I'm going to give you this $10 bill," say. That would be, whereas obviously if the same person went up to the street person and said, "By God's grace, I somehow was able all my life to work, and since I have extra money, I'm so happy to give it to you." That would obviously be more humble, right? So I mean, we might want to look to see, or even if you have the humility to do it, to ask everyone you know, what are small things I do in a way that seems to you to be a little arrogant versus humble? Well, of course, that's my whole way of teaching, is to try to force people to actually ask other people who know you, where do you see arrogance in me, say, or where do you see pride in me, you know. But I don't know, people tell me that women find this easier than men, so maybe you want to comment on that thought. I mean, that women find it easier to ask other people these kind of humble questions, whereas men like to just guess.
Oh, I don't think that's true of men. That can't possibly be so of us.
Yeah.
But to shift to a woman example in humility, there are so many anecdotes about Dorothy Day, but this is one that's told by a Harvard psychologist named Robert Cole, although he may have retired by now, I'm not sure. He wrote a great many books, and most of his books had to do with I think, child psychology and child psychologists, but he did write a book on Dorothy Day. And when he came to write that book, of course, number one, he had to meet her, and then he had to talk to her on a number of occasions. But the first time he met her, she was talking with a street person, broadly understood a street person, for some time, and so he finally kind of decided he'd just go up to where they were. And the two women continued, because the street person was a woman, to continue to speak for a while, and then Dorothy looked up at him and said, "Would you like to speak with one of us?"
Yeah.
She didn't say, what do you want to ask me? Would you care to speak with one of us? And that made a strong impression on him.
Well, yeah, that's back to our equality before God.
Yeah.
Which is very anti Can't come up with a word right now. Our civilization doesn't look at things that way.
Now, I told Sebastian that the next time that there was a pause in our conversation, because he thinks that they're all pregnant pauses, that I ask around and see if anybody would loan me $50. And he said, "Go for it, dude. Go for it.
Go for it."
He didn't say that. He didn't say that. I just made that part up.
What's your address? Street address, Jim? Won't you be surprised if I actually send it?
No. I mean, in my line of business, you have to have a post office. You have to have a post office box. You don't want them to be able to come and get it back.
This is Al. That meeting I mentioned last night that I was at, the person that I've already mentioned without a name also said about our program that it seemed like we jumped around a lot, that there were spaces and where nothing was going on, and I said, well, of course it's conversation, and of course there are going to be some breaks, and especially when you're dealing with a bunch of thoughty people. They're going to think, hopefully, before they act. So in real life,
in real life, you could see that somebody was just sipping on the wine.
There, yeah, right, yeah. You caught me, Jim. But I think the space is
in Corpus Christi. Good grief!
Oh, you don't know what time I got up either. But in any event, I would think some of the empty spaces even help the listeners to think through what they just heard, as long as it's not one of our bad jokes.
Well, I wanted just something I was saving to say about humility was I think we could have a whole program relating this topic and other topics to aging in this sense, that I certainly feel humbled by aging. I'm going to turn 80 on Monday. And the feeling of being more fragile and needing more help, like there's a certain pride, I consider it this word, the pride of life. We take a certain pride in our independence and our strength, physical strength and things like that. And I find it very humbling to realize I need the loving care and help of other people. And out of a certain pride, I always want to say, I could pay you for the time you're spending helping me. And then say, no, we want to do this out of love for you. And I find that very humbling. It's so I'm sure some of you, there's a difference in age among us. Of course, Katie is the youngest, but she's not always on here. But the rest of us are not so far from the same age. And could talk about humility in relation to aging.
By the way, we're out of time.
Right. This is Al. Shall I... The topic for our next session is St. Anselm's Paradox. St. Anselm's Paradox. And to learn what that really is, tune in next week. Over to you, Bob.
Okay, thank you. And so we will be back same time, same station next week with the open door. Just in closing, I don't see anything wrong with those pauses, really. It didn't seem awkward to me. I mean, it just happens, like you said, Commander Al, that, and this is conversation. I mean, it happens that way. So, in the meantime, before we see you next week, may God bless each and every one of you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.